Country music has always sounded honest on stage. But behind the scenes, some of its biggest legends were locked in bitter rivalries fueled by jealousy, ego, heartbreak, and wounded pride. Beneath the cowboy hats and Southern charm were feuds that divided fans, shook Nashville, and changed careers forever. Some of these stars refused to speak to each other for years, while others turned their anger into unforgettable music. Tonight, we're diving into the most legendary rivalries in country music history. One George Glenn Jones versus Harold Lloyd Jenkins. For years, country music fans quietly argued about one question: who was the greater voice, George Jones or Conway Twitty? On the surface, the two men were friendly enough in public. They shared stages, respected each other's success, and both dominated country radio for decades. But behind the scenes, there was a deep rivalry fueled by ego, comparison, and the constant pressure of Nashville fame. George Jones represented raw heartbreak. His voice sounded wounded, unpredictable, and painfully real. Conway Twitty, meanwhile, became the smoother superstar, polished, romantic, and commercially unstoppable. As the 1970s exploded, Conway began collecting massive crossover hits, sold-out shows, and legions of female fans. Some insiders later claimed that George privately hated how much attention Conway was getting. The rivalry became even more intense because fans constantly compared them. Critics debated who had the better voice. Radio stations pushed one against the other. Even award shows quietly fueled the tension. George Jones was often called the greatest country singer alive, but Conway Twitty kept breaking records and outselling nearly everyone in Nashville. What made the situation worse was George's personal chaos, his battles with alcohol-damaged tours, relationships, and recording schedules. Conway, on the other hand, maintained a more controlled public image. In many ways, Conway became the version of success George struggled to hold on to. Yet despite all the rivalry, there was also mutual respect buried underneath the tension. Both men understood something few others could. They carried the emotional weight of classic country music on their shoulders. And by the time both legends reached the later years of their careers, their rivalry had already become one of the most talked about battles in country music history. 2 John R. Cash versus Merle Ronald Haggard. Few rivalries in country music felt as complicated as the quiet tension between Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard. Both men became symbols of outlaw country. Both sang about prison, pain, and hard living, and both built careers around the image of rebellious American masculinity. But beneath the mutual admiration was a rivalry driven by pride, competition, and two very different views of authenticity. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, Johnny Cash was already becoming larger than life. He had television shows, crossover fame, political attention, and national recognition that stretched far beyond country music. Merle Haggard, meanwhile, came from a rougher world. His experiences felt raw, dangerous, and deeply personal. Unlike Cash, Haggard had actually served time in prison, and many fans believed his songs carried a darker honesty. That comparison quietly followed them for years. Merle reportedly grew frustrated whenever people treated Johnny Cash as the ultimate outlaw figure. To Haggard, outlaw country was not just an image, it was survival. Some close to the scene later claimed that Merle believed Cash had become too polished, too commercial, and too close to mainstream America. At the same time, Johnny Cash admired Haggard's songwriting but disliked parts of Merle's political image during the height of songs like Okie from Muskogee. Their personalities clashed as well. Cash was emotional and spiritual, while Haggard often came across as harder, sharper, and more guarded. Still, the rivalry never exploded publicly into hatred. That is partly what made it legendary. The tension remained hidden beneath interviews, performances, and carefully chosen words. Fans could sense it without always hearing it directly. In many ways, Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard spent decades competing for the same title, the true voice of working-class country America. 3 Loretta Lynn versus Virginia Wynette. Pew. During the golden years of country music, few unspoken rivalries fascinated Nashville more than the quiet competition between Loretta Lynn and Tammy Wynette. Both women became legendary voices of heartbreak, survival, and female pain. But behind the glamour of the Grand Ole Opry stood 2 queens fighting for the same throne. Loretta Lynn represented rural strength. She sang about poverty, motherhood, cheating husbands, and real-life struggles with fearless honesty. Her image felt grounded, tough, and deeply connected to working-class America. Tammy Wynette, on the other hand, became the emotional face of romantic suffering. Songs like Stand By Your Man transformed her into the voice of loyalty, heartbreak, and vulnerability. The media constantly compared them. Reporters asked who was the true queen of country music. Fans argued endlessly over whose songs carried more emotional truth. Record labels quietly fueled the rivalry because controversy sold records. Even though Loretta and Tammy often appeared polite in public, insiders claimed there was undeniable tension whenever awards, charts, or television appearances placed them side by side. Part of the rivalry came from how different they were as women. Loretta projected independence and fiery confidence. Tammy often appeared fragile, elegant, and emotionally wounded. Their public images represented two completely different versions of Southern womanhood, and country audiences naturally split into opposing camps. As the years passed, Tammy's personal scandals and unstable marriages kept her constantly in tabloids, while Loretta maintained a more stable image within Nashville. Some believed Loretta quietly looked down on the chaos surrounding Tammy's private life. Others believed Tammy envied Loretta's strength and long-lasting reputation, but underneath the rivalry was a strange bond. Both women understood the loneliness that came with fame in a male-dominated industry. They survived heartbreak, pressure, addiction around them, and the brutal expectations placed on female country stars. By the end of their careers, the rivalry between Loretta Lynn and Tammy Wynette had become one of the defining emotional battles of classic country music. For Waylon Jennings versus Willie Hugh Nelson. At first glance, it seemed impossible that Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson could ever become rivals. Together, they helped build the outlaw country movement, rejected Nashville's strict rules, and created some of the most iconic music of the 1970s. To fans, they looked like brothers, but behind the friendship was a quiet rivalry built on ego, artistic competition, and two giant personalities trying to lead the same revolution. Waylon Jennings was intense, stubborn, and fiercely protective of his identity. He wanted outlaw country to sound rough, rebellious, and dangerous. Willie Nelson, meanwhile, moved through the industry differently. He was calmer, more unpredictable, and musically experimental. While Waylon fought Nashville head-on, Willie often seemed to float above the chaos, winning people over with charm and intelligence. As outlaw country exploded in popularity, the tension slowly grew. Both men were competing for the same spotlight, the same audiences, and the same legacy. Albums sold in massive numbers, tours became enormous events, and the media constantly asked who the true king of outlaw country really was. Some insiders claimed Waylon grew frustrated when Willie received broader mainstream attention and appeared more universally loved. Their lifestyles also created friction. Waylon struggled heavily with cocaine addiction and periods of emotional darkness. Willie handled fame differently and often appeared more balanced despite his wild reputation. Behind closed doors, there were moments when the friendship reportedly became strained by business disagreements, scheduling conflicts, and the pressure of constant success. Still, neither man could completely escape the other's shadow. That was what made the rivalry so fascinating. They needed each other while simultaneously competing against each other. Their partnership fueled some of country music's greatest moments, but it also created an undercurrent of tension fans could always feel. In the end, Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson became two sides of the same outlaw legend, forever linked together through friendship, rivalry, and the music that changed Nashville forever. 5. Randall Hank Williams Jr. vs. Troyal, Garth Brooks. By the early 1990s, country music was changing faster than ever before, and few people represented that change more dramatically than Hank Williams Jr. and Garth Brooks. What started as a difference in musical philosophy slowly turned into one of the most talked-about rivalries in modern country music history. Hank Williams Jr. came from country royalty. He carried the heavy legacy of his father, Hank Williams, while building his own outlaw image through hard living, Southern pride, and rebellious music. To many traditional fans, Bocephus represented real country music, raw, loud, unapologetic, and deeply connected to the working-class South. Then came Garth Brooks. Suddenly, country concerts looked more like rock stadium shows. Garth exploded into superstardom with giant crowds, emotional performances, crossover success, and record-breaking album sales. Millions of new fans entered country music through him, but not everyone was happy about it. Hank Williams Jr. became one of the loudest critics of Nashville's changing direction. He believed country music was losing its rough soul and becoming too polished for mainstream audiences. Even when he avoided directly attacking Garth Brooks by name, fans and journalists understood exactly who he was talking about. Meanwhile, Garth Brooks represented a completely different generation of country stardom. He respected the legends, but embraced spectacle, marketing, and crossover appeal in ways older artists often distrusted. The rivalry became symbolic of a larger battle inside country music itself: tradition versus modernization. Fans quickly divided into opposing camps. Older listeners defended Hank's outlaw authenticity, while younger audiences embraced Garth as the future of country entertainment. Radio stations, award shows, and television networks quietly benefited from the tension. Yet despite the rivalry, there was always an uneasy layer of respect underneath it. Both men understood how difficult it was to carry enormous expectations in country music, and in their own very different ways, both became defining faces of their eras. 6. Virginia Patterson Hensley versus Ellen Muriel Deason. Long before modern country music became dominated by massive arenas and television fame, Patsy Cline and Kitty Wells were already battling for something much bigger: the right for women to stand at the center of country music itself. Their rivalry was not loud or openly hostile, but it shaped an entire era of Nashville history. Kitty Wells became one of the first true female superstars in country music. In the 1950s, her songs gave a voice to women who felt ignored, betrayed, or judged by society. She opened doors that many believed would never open for female performers in country music. For years, Kitty represented the standard every woman in Nashville was measured against. Then Patsy Cline arrived. Unlike Kitty Wells, Patsy brought a completely different energy. Her voice was smoother, more emotional, and capable of crossing into pop music without losing its country soul. She carried glamour, confidence, and stage presence that felt revolutionary at the time. As her popularity exploded in the early 1960s, Nashville insiders began quietly debating whether Patsy Cline was surpassing the very woman who had paved the way for her. The comparisons became constant. Radio stations pushed their records against each other. Fans argued over which singer carried more emotional power. Some traditionalists preferred Kitty's pure country roots, while others believed Patsy represented the future of female country music. Though both women remained professional in public, tension reportedly existed beneath the surface. Patsy's growing crossover success brought her enormous attention, and some within the industry believed Kitty Wells felt overshadowed by the younger star's rapid rise. Tragically, Patsy Cline's sudden death in 1963 froze the rivalry in time forever. She never had the chance to fully dominate Nashville the way many predicted she would. In the years that followed, country music historians continued debating the same question fans once argued about decades earlier: who truly changed country music more, Kitty Wells or Patsy Cline? 7. Kenneth Ray Rogers versus Harold Lloyd Jenkins. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, few men dominated country music more completely than Kenny Rogers and Conway Twitty. Both became massive stars, both attracted huge female audiences, and both transformed country music into something smoother, more romantic, and commercially unstoppable. But behind the success was a rivalry fueled by charts, ego, and the fight to become Nashville's ultimate crossover king. Conway Twitty had already built an empire before Kenny Rogers fully conquered country music. His deep voice, seductive image, and endless string of romantic hits made him one of the most reliable stars in America. Conway represented classic masculinity: confident, intimate, and unmistakably Southern. He understood his audience better than almost anyone in Nashville. Then Kenny Rogers exploded into superstardom. Unlike Conway, Kenny crossed far beyond traditional country audiences. His music reached pop radio, television, film, and international fame on a level few country singers had ever achieved before. Suddenly, he was everywhere. Award shows, magazine covers, sold-out tours, Kenny Rogers became one of the biggest entertainers in the world. The comparisons quickly became unavoidable. Many insiders believe Conway privately resented how much attention Kenny received from mainstream America. Conway continued producing hit after hit, yet Kenny often seemed to overshadow everyone around him. The industry constantly framed them as competing symbols of modern country success. Their personalities also clashed in subtle ways. Conway preferred privacy and control, while Kenny embraced celebrity culture more openly. Fans debated endlessly about who truly deserved the title of country music's greatest romantic superstar. Even their music reflected the rivalry. Conway's songs felt deeply Southern and emotionally intimate, while Kenny's records often sounded larger, cinematic, and designed for global audiences. Nashville quietly split between those who believed country music should remain traditional and those who embraced crossover evolution. Despite the tension, both men respected each other's extraordinary talent. And by the time their careers slowed decades later, the Kenny Rogers versus Conway Twitty rivalry had already become one of the defining commercial battles in country music history.